12,000 years ago, long before the pyramids or writing, a group of hunter-gatherers built something that should not have been possible. Göbekli Tepe, a vast complex of stone circles, carved animals, and pillars weighing tons, all arranged with purpose, precision, and symbolism. But what if Göbekli Tepe wasn't a temple at all? What if it was something deeper, something designed to remember? Time seems to hesitate on this hill, where the wind moves across stone as if it were turning the pages of a forgotten book. Buried beneath 12 millennia of soil, Göbekli Tepe waited for us to rediscover it. And when it emerged, it didn't simply change archaeology. It changed the way we think about ourselves. Because this place is older than any temple, older than any city, older than anything we believed human hands could build. And yet, it stands, perfect in geometry, precise in placement, haunting in silence. A message from a world that should not have known how to speak. The question has never been whether Göbekli Tepe is extraordinary. It is, but why it exists. Who gathered the strength and vision to raise pillars of limestone taller than men, to carve their surfaces with animals, symbols, and shapes that seem to pulse with hidden intention? For decades, we called it the First Temple, a place of worship at the dawn of faith. But the stones resist that idea. They are too measured, too thoughtful, too complex to be the product of mere superstition. This was not a cry to the gods. It was a conversation with time. Imagine the world of its builders. The last glaciers were dying. The climate was shifting with terrifying speed. Rivers flooded, forests moved, the great beasts of the Ice Age vanished. For a small population of hunter-gatherers, the earth itself seemed unstable. Every sunrise might reveal a new landscape, and in that instability, one truth emerged. Survival depends on memory. The people of Göbekli Tepe learned that knowledge about seasons, migrations, the behavior of animals, the rhythm of stars, was more valuable than any possession. But words did not yet exist. So they created another language, carved not in sound, but in stone. Look closely at the reliefs that spiral around the pillars. The serpent winds endlessly. The fox darts beneath it. The vulture spreads its wings above. To modern eyes, these may seem decorative, but each was a concept. The serpent embodied change, the flow between worlds, the shedding of the old for the new. The fox was adaptability, the quick mind that survives where strength fails. The vulture, forever watching from above, was memory itself, the keeper of what must not be forgotten. Together they form a grammar of transformation, a sentence written in the language of nature. The builders did not carve animals because they feared them, but because they recognized in them the principles that rule existence. Every pillar was a page, every circle a chapter. Their placement was deliberate. The twin T-shaped monoliths at the center of each enclosure faced one another like mirrors. They bore human arms and hands, abstract, faceless, yet unmistakably human. They stand for the meeting of two ideas, the individual and the collective, the human and the natural. Around them, smaller pillars encircle like listeners at a gathering, each carrying a different emblem of life. The layout is a conversation frozen in architecture, a dialogue between knowledge and remembrance. The geometry itself carries meaning. The enclosures are circular, a form without beginning or end, echoing the cycles of season and star. To build in circles is to declare that nothing truly dies. It merely transforms. Within those rings, time was not linear. It was alive, breathing, returning. The builders understood that memory too must be cyclical, renewed, repeated, retold. Perhaps the ceremonies held here were acts of collective remembering, when tribes gathered not to worship a deity, but to recite the code of survival, to re-engrave in mind what the stones already held in form. At the center of this design lies a revelation about humanity itself. Göbekli Tepe is evidence that cooperation preceded agriculture, that meaning built community long before necessity did. To raise such monuments required hundreds of people sharing one vision. They were not unified by kings or armies, but by a story, a shared understanding that knowledge was sacred. The sanctuary was both classroom and archive, performance and preservation. Here, memory became architecture, and architecture became a teacher. Notice how many of the carvings face inward, not outward. They were meant for the people within the circle, not for the world beyond it. This was an interior space, a place of introspection, where humans could stand among the symbols of the wild and remember their place within it. In that sense, Göbekli Tepe was humanity's first mirror, a structure that reflected not the gods above, but the mind within. It taught that meaning is not found in conquest of nature, but in harmony with it. The sanctuary's construction reveals an astonishing mastery of pattern. Each stone was quarried, shaped, and transported with care. No two enclosures are identical, yet all follow the same fundamental rhythm. This repetition suggests intent. The builders were not improvising. They were following a template, a mental blueprint passed from generation to generation. That continuity is memory made visible. It implies that Göbekli Tepe was not a single event, but an institution, a place where human thought was practiced, refined, and preserved across centuries. Even the act of carving carried symbolic weight. To strike stone with stone, to leave a mark that would outlast the maker, was itself a declaration. We remember, and we will be remembered. In a world where nature erased everything, carving became defiance against oblivion. Every blow of the chisel was a heartbeat of permanence. When their task was complete, something remarkable happened. The builders buried the sanctuary. They filled the circles with earth, sealed the pillars beneath layers of soil, and walked away. Why would they hide the very thing they had devoted generations to building? Because its purpose was fulfilled. Göbekli Tepe had served its cycle. Its knowledge had been internalized. To bury it was to protect it from decay, to ensure that its message would one day return when humanity was ready to understand again. They were not erasing, they were archiving. This deliberate burial transforms Göbekli Tepe into more than architecture. It becomes a time capsule of consciousness. The builders knew that memory is only valuable when it survives loss. By sealing their sanctuary, they enacted the very principle it taught: preservation through transformation. Just as the serpent sheds its skin, so the sanctuary entered the earth to be reborn millennia later. What, then, was the real purpose of this place? Not worship, not shelter, but calibration, a way for early humans to align themselves with the rhythms of a changing planet. Göbekli Tepe was an observatory not of stars, but of patterns, social, biological, spiritual. It was a reminder carved in stone that everything moves in cycles: climate, life, civilization. Those who forget the cycles are destroyed by them. Those who remember adapt. The sanctuary's message is evolution itself. Seen this way, Göbekli Tepe was the first act of human science, philosophy, and art combined. It stands at the border between myth and measurement, where storytelling becomes understanding. Its builders looked at nature and saw not chaos, but code. They built a structure to translate that code into permanence, to pass it forward not through writing, but through resonance. Even now, when sunlight cuts across the carvings and shadows trace their outlines, the stones seem to speak the same silent lesson. Observe, remember, renew. Over time, the impulse born here spread. The idea that knowledge could be preserved physically through symbol, monument, inscription, became the foundation of every civilization that followed. From the stone circles of Europe to the pyramids of Egypt, from cuneiform tablets to libraries, every archive of human thought descends from this hill. Göbekli Tepe was not the first temple. It was the first memory device. A biological species had invented cultural immortality. That insight changes everything we believe about progress. Civilization did not begin with farming or kingship. It began with memory, with the decision to preserve meaning beyond the moment. Agriculture and writing were consequences of that decision, not causes of it. In this sense, Göbekli Tepe is the true genesis of culture, the point where thought became legacy. Today, as archaeologists uncover more of its layers, we find that the site was not isolated. There were smaller versions scattered across the region, as if Göbekli Tepe were a prototype, a central node in a network of sanctuaries devoted to the same idea. Each echoed the same circular plan, the same animal motifs, the same orientation to the heavens. It was as if an early civilization, unrecorded, unnamed, had briefly illuminated the world, then deliberately stepped back into the shadows, leaving only stone to speak for them. Standing there now, amid the quiet hum of wind and insects, you can feel the weight of that choice. The air vibrates with the awareness that these stones have witnessed the entire human story. Every rise, every fall, every rediscovery. They endured fire, flood, empire, and forgetfulness, only to emerge in our century like a memory finally recalled. And perhaps that is exactly what the builders intended, to ensure that when we, their distant descendants, were once again in danger of forgetting who we are, their message would return. That message is not mystical, it is profoundly rational. It says, remember the cycles. Remember that creation and destruction are the same rhythm. Remember that survival belongs to those who adapt, and adaptation begins with awareness. Göbekli Tepe teaches that intelligence is not new. It is ancient, buried, waiting to be recognized in ourselves. If we listen closely, the sanctuary speaks with gentle urgency. It reminds us that every generation builds its own Göbekli Tepe, a system of meaning meant to outlast it. Ours may be digital rather than stone, but the intention is identical: to hold knowledge against the erosion of time. The difference is that they built theirs with humility, understanding that permanence is an illusion, that true endurance lies in renewal. They buried their library so that it could live again. We, perhaps, might learn from that. As the sun sets over the Anatolian plateau, shadows stretch across the pillars, and the carvings seem to awaken under the fading light. You can almost sense the presence of the hands that shaped them. Steady, deliberate, human. 12,000 years collapse into a single heartbeat. In that silence, you realize that Göbekli Tepe is not a relic of the past. It is a reflection of the present. It asks a simple question: what will we carve for those who come after us? What will we choose to remember? Because memory, not technology, is the true measure of civilization. It is what binds the first fire to the first word, the first story to the first stone. It is the thread that leads from that ancient hill to every library, every screen, every mind that seeks to understand. And as long as we continue to remember, truly remember, the builders of Göbekli Tepe are still alive within us. Perhaps that was their purpose all along. Not to build a monument to their world, but a bridge to ours. A silent promise carved in limestone, that knowledge must never be forgotten, that wisdom must never be buried, that humanity must always find its way